Okay, if you want to start, let's go ahead.
Sounds good. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Mark Horn from Agile Source. We're a software development and AWS consulting company. We've been an AWS partner for about 8 years now. Been around the block helping lots of different companies with cloud migrations, modernizations, and optimization. One of our specialties. So thank you again for attending. I have with us Andy, who is an AWS expert, and he's going to walk us over the hidden cost of licensing. So, Andy?
Thank you, guys. Just seconding what Mark just said, thank you, everybody that's joining in for taking time of your day. We promise we're going to make it as light and as fun and as instructive as possible. My name is Andy Espinosa. We're here today on behalf and thanks to Agile Source, just to give you guys a brief overview of what AWS is working with in tandem and alongside partners such as Agile Source that have been instrumental to driving AWS business forward, and why Agile Source has decided to put this program together to fund a special promotion for an assessment called the OLA to help organizations at no cost for the time being, no commitment, just to help you guys understand how to better uncover how to better maximize your existing infrastructure and how to ensure that you can move forward accordingly. So we should hopefully go through the presentation in 30 to 35 minutes. The idea for these types of sessions is to make it as interactive as possible. So don't hesitate if you have any questions or any comments, any ideas, just put them on the chat. Mark, Eric, January, myself, and the rest of the team will be able to answer any questions that you may have about Agile Source, about AWS, about the OLA, and hopefully to be able to help you to move forward, okay? So just to get started, I think one of the main components that we'll be talking today about is why it makes sense to migrate to the cloud, but also to understand the first step of thinking about migrating to the cloud, how to take a look at what you currently have in your organization so that you can make more precise and more correct decisions that make the most sense for your organization. So at AWS, we see many commonplace challenges when we talk about migrating to the cloud. Companies and organizational leaders, sometimes the first challenge, well, like everything in life, sometimes what you don't know that you don't know is the hardest blind spot that sometimes we come across. And similarly, it applies to cloud, right? There are many good notions, good word out there on the street when you ask people about cloud in general, but when we talk about cloud migration per se, organizations and leaders often have similar concerns, right? In terms of the cost management to ensuring that once we migrate to the cloud, that the right sizing, that the right applications, that the right infrastructure and modules are correctly placed so that it makes sense for the company as is today, but also to permit flexibility and growth in the future, right? Security and compliance risk are always fundamental every time we talk to organizations through AWS, side by side with companies like Agile Source. We realize that most IT departments, IT leaders, and execs always have security as one of their main concerns or one of their main anchor points when we talk about just infrastructure in general and operational infrastructure for the business. Migrating to the cloud oftentimes also causes concerns in terms of ensuring that there are no disruptions, that when we're able to migrate legacy systems to the cloud, we ensure business continuity without any problems. So to ensure that the company can keep on its day-to-days without any interruption for our bread and butter, right? Which is ultimately what we do. And especially nowadays, as we see that more and more companies are basically becoming more technology companies, right? We live in a very fast-paced world, and whether you're in manufacturing or in agriculture or space exploration, ultimately technology is a fundamental component of any organization, right? And that ties into also not having the expertise. Organizations, they just don't have that built-in expertise about cloud, how to migrate, and how to manage and deploy infrastructure or platforms or applications on the cloud correctly to make sure that everything is up and running correctly, right? And lastly, data migration and complexity. That's also ties into ensuring that there are no disruptions when migrating to the cloud, especially nowadays with data that has become so important and so relevant in this age of AI. We've been living through this past 2 years in a very hype world of machine learning, and it's really not a hype. We see most organizations really embracing the future of AI, migrating to AI, understanding how to deploy better AI engines within their organization, whether using their own LLMs or building LLMs on top of other foundational models. But all that to say that data is fundamental for proper AI and machine learning usage, right? Without data, without good data, AI is really useless. So at the end of the day, these are commonplace concerns and questions that organizational leaders have, right? So what AWS has done is to help organizations understand where they are, to gauge whether or not it makes sense to migrate to the cloud. It always, 99% of the time, it always makes sense. I know I'm sounding very salesy, but it's the truth. We're going to see why. But ultimately, the OLA was designed to help organizations understand where they are in their current infrastructure footprint and how to leverage the cloud to reduce expenses, to become more efficient, to enhance security. The OLA usually has a cost, and basically what it does is takes an overview of a company's workloads, applications, licensing environment, hosting, servers, and it usually has a cost. But with Agile Source and AWS, we have done a special promotional period where it will have no cost for any companies that join, at the very least, to help you guys understand where you are on your current footprint and your architecture, and how we could help you moving forward, right? So it's like going to the doctor. We don't like to go to the doctor, but it's necessary to go to the doctor. And once you go, you realize that you have to take certain steps to improve your health or to keep doing good what you're doing, right? So it's similarly, that's why we want to help you and continue to drive value, right? So one of the main components that the OLA assessment really takes into consideration is right sizing. When we talk about migration, oftentimes their companies don't understand that what really you have on-prem or on co-locations doesn't necessarily have to translate or equate to the exact same one-to-one parity when you migrate to the cloud. When you migrate to the cloud, we're able to use, and we're going to be seeing this in a few minutes, you're able to use mixed tenancy, you're able to reduce expenses significantly by using the large scale that AWS has in this case to really help you reduce expenses, right? So you're able to right size your required resources. That reduces expenses. That shifts companies from a CapEx model or prepaid model of their existing infrastructure footprint to a pay-as-you-go model, right? Where companies can only pay for the demand capacity that they need, that facilitates their day-to-day operations, their ability to scale, whether up or down. We talk about cloud having that ability to scale up, right? And we always talk about up. That's what we want. We want companies to grow, but we also live in a world that's very competitive. Sometimes we have to shut down certain business units. Sometimes we have to downsize for an economic downturn. Being on the cloud lets you do that seamlessly as well. So those are the many benefits that being on the cloud truly offer, and just being able to have that flexibility, that pay-as-you-go type of system in place really makes everything just so much easier. In terms when we have, and this is in the U.S. when we do hundreds or thousands of these really on a yearly basis of OLAs with the companies, and again it's non-committal. What we're doing is we want to help organizations at the very least understand where they are to make sure that we can provide these insights. And it's funny because we would think, when that it's easy to pinpoint at these matters, but when we're running an organization, we're running our company, whether you're the CTO or IT director or even the CEO or senior management, sometimes we start to grow and we start to pylon our tech stack and building our tech stack based on what the current needs are, and sometimes without much strategy. And the years go by and we don't really take the moment to realize what we have done or why we have done it, or if it continues to make sense. So when we run the OLA, we're able to provide a very good, insightful report that provides an overview of the organization's infrastructure and how to save money, right? We will pinpoint that for you. For example, on average, we see that 36% of companies reduce, there's a 36% reduction of cost on average on licensing, which is one of the main components that we look at with the OLA. We also see 77% savings on Windows servers licensing and a 45% savings on SQL's core CPU licensing, right? So all in all, one of the wonderful things that we do through the OLA, but also AWS in general, being a very agnostic platform, is that AWS was built to really foster an environment where companies can continue to work with their existing footprint of applications, of software, of hosting services, SQL-based services, databases that can migrate on AWS and live cohesively within AWS, right? One of the most commonplace items that we're looking at over the past, I would say since last year, for example, in terms of workloads, is VMware-based workloads. We understand there was if anybody listening today, right, if you have VMware licenses, you know that there were recently some changes to the VMware, the VMC's licensing pricing, to the terms and conditions, whether you're on-prem or on cloud. So we're helping many companies to better assess what their licensing environment looks like in terms of VMware and how to migrate to the cloud to help you reduce expenses and how to become more operationally efficient. Similar with Microsoft Windows Server, Microsoft SQL servers, Oracle database and applications. We integrate with Red Hat, OpenShift, Kubernetes. So AWS was really built to assess all the workloads that you have, and that's what we do with the OLA to help you at the very least have a roadmap to success. So what we do with the OLA, we basically scope out those workloads. It's done through an agentless tool called the AWS Migration Evaluator tool. It is very seamless. It can run in a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending on the size of your current environment. At AWS, we would collect that data, we analyze that data, and then in partnership with Agile Source, we would create a plan to help you at the very least have a snapshot of of how to help you, right? So as I mentioned, the migration evaluator, it's very seamless. It's very intuitive to deploy. It is agentless, so it makes the entire process very seamless, very easy to do. We basically scope out Windows, Linux operating systems. As I mentioned, we take a look at everything operating, hosting, servers, licensing, Microsoft SQL, Hyper-V, Microsoft Hyper-V infrastructure as well, VMware that we also just mentioned. And beyond the agentless tool, the migration evaluator tool, there's also a second way that every once in a while we work with companies using a flat file, so just a CSV, to upload that data, and we can do that as well. So we can adapt to your needs, and that's something that we always like to say and to do at AWS. As much as we would like to standardize how to help organizations, we understand that each company is a living, breathing animal, that's what every company is, right? With its own DNA, with its own leadership, and with its own needs. So we really want to make sure that we hear you, and that's what we do at AWS. And with Agile Source, we really understand that each company is different, and we take that into serious consideration, right? So all in all, what the OLA will be able to help you is to, once we do that analysis of your workloads, of your environment, we're able to produce a cost optimization report component that will help you understand how to save money going forward. And whether or not you migrate to the cloud, that is yours to keep, right? And then we will provide a cloud readiness assessment component, which will help you on your digital journey to move forward, should we be able to help you alongside with Agile Source to become more nimble and to reduce expenses by migrating to the cloud, right? So all in all, the OLA truly provides significant insights for informed decision making. We see this is my day-to-day. I see this all the time. Cost savings is, I always say that I really love my job because it's a very easy job because we're really helping people. Every time we run an OLA and we really showcase how to help companies reduce money, it's a no-brainer. So it really is a way that we continue to add value across the board. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we take very seriously that every company is different. So we provide customized, tailored recommendations to what you need to ensure not only for the short term, but that you're positioned for success in the long run, right? And that's what Agile Source has been doing for over a decade, and that's what we continue to do, right? As you guys know, AWS has been around for a couple of decades now. AWS built this space, really. We really built this industry, this cloud solutions industry. We have worked with thousands of companies worldwide. We work with SMBs, smaller size companies to large Fortune 500 publicly traded companies, government agencies, right? In the US, the CIA, the NASA, they use AWS, companies like Netflix and Airbnb and Coca-Cola. So you name it, Capital One, in the financial services, Berkshire Hathaway, they're all on AWS, right? Pearson, Global Publishing House, Accenture, Unity. So we have, not only do we help and have we helped many organizations, but we have many use cases that also when we do the OLA, again, it's complementary for this time period. We can also look at common use cases or success stories of similar companies to your industry, to your space, and then we can compare and gauge that and use those as, like barometers in a way to benchmark against, right? So basically, that's just an overview of why it really makes sense to have the OLA and to really make use of this time, of this period where we're running this alongside with Agile Source. What really makes sense to move forward in today's session is to walk you guys through an example of an actual OLA assessment that we have done. So we do this, we do hundreds of these every month with companies. The important thing is to understand what the main components are so that you can have a better idea of what we're talking about. This is an actual example of a company. Of course, we can't publicly say the company's name. We have tweaked some things here and there just simply for privacy matters, but it is an actual report, so it will help you understand what the report really does and why it adds so much value, right? So the first component of the OLA report is basically an exec summary where we basically summarize what the scope of the analysis was, right? So for example, in this case, we see that it took 26 days to collect that data. We scoped out 41 servers out of a total 70 servers. We usually like to scope out every single server, but sometimes we understand that whether because we want to make it faster or whether maybe for compliance and regulatory matters, but if we have a large enough sample size, we're able to extrapolate that into the findings for the report, right? So for example, in this report, we're able to see that out of all the servers, 38% are not being used, so they're zombies. We estimated when we did this report for this company that 49% of cost could be reduced compared to a direct match report when doing that mixed tenancy, that right sizing approach for AWS migration. And we realized that 78% of the servers were being used less than 20% of the time. So this is, again, it's like going to the doctor. You don't realize we're all so busy running our company on the day-to-day that when somebody tells you this, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea, right? So this is where the true value really comes in. Just imagine, just on this first snapshot, we can already see how much value it's adding. In terms of the scope, for example, in this case, it was 70 instances or cores. Some were Windows servers, some were Linux servers, some were just for provision storage. So we take everything into consideration. We do a full inventory of the entire environment that companies have to make sure that we're addressing everything that's within scope. Beyond the servers and the entire environment, we also look very seriously into the licensing component. The OLA was really born to assess only licensing. It's just grown a little bit in scope over the past few years, but we also take into consideration the licensing agreements that companies have. For example, in this case, again, Windows servers, right? How many licenses have been expired or are not being used, right? So this is where, and it's funny, like we look at this and we're like, yeah, every company should know this. We don't. Like, companies are running their day to day, and it's so difficult to keep tabs on everything, right? SQL servers for Microsoft, similarly the same thing, right? In this case, we were able to say, hey, look, you have all these licenses. We're able to provide you an insightful resource to reduce licenses that you're not using. Sometimes we see so much duplication across licenses because you have different siloed departments within a company, and they don't talk to each other, and they're paying for the same licensing, and they don't, and the company doesn't even know, or they don't realize, right? Nobody takes the time to evaluate and ask, why are we paying for these licenses, right? So it really gets interesting. Beyond and in tandem that executive summary and the licensing component, we also the next step is to look at the financial summary aspect of the OLA, how to help you reduce expenses should you decide to migrate to the cloud. Again, the OLA is being run by Agile SRC that have decided to fund this for a time being, so there's no commitment. But should you decide to migrate to the cloud, partially or in full, we're able to provide you with some insights as to what it would look like, what your architecture would look like. Should we do the right sizing? Should we use reserved instances, for example, which this is what this slide is showing, right? We're showing if the organization migrates to the cloud, their current infrastructure, and we use right sizing and we use reserved instances, which basically is forecasting the demand capacity based on your prior history and what you expect. We're able to reduce expenses even further within AWS, right? So just to not overcomplicate things, but for example, on this, when we do the OLA, we will walk you through all of these key components in further detail. But just for today's example, we see, for example, if we do a 3-year annualized upfront reserved instances for year one, we're talking about for $81,000, right? So per year for the first 3 years, this is the forecast that we're able to provide. If we keep the licenses that the organization has until the remainder, and reducing some of the unused licenses, that would come down to $55,000 or $56,000. If we were to do the exact same thing that this company had, and we migrate everything as is, right? And we're comparing apples to apples, and we migrate everything to AWS without any right sizing, without any other efficiencies that AWS provides, the annual cost would be $187,000, right? So it's almost 3 times as much as we just saw for the $56,000. So we can see right off the bat why migrating to the cloud not only helps to reduce that cost footprint of a company by migrating to an on-demand, pay-as-you-go, monthly type of billing type of environment, but we're also able to say, well, why are we going to keep what doesn't work? This is the good time to really become more efficient and help you or your organization to become more efficient, more lean, so that you're able to keep being that way in the future, right? This report, for example, we continue to see also how we had 16 core CPUs. We're able to reduce that to 8, so that's a 50% reduction. And this comes from I mentioned this earlier, from the shared tenancy or mixed tenancy type of environment that we truly foster. And this is where the magic of working with AWS really comes in, right? Because you don't have to buy that on-prem physical hardware. You're able to simply distribute your workloads across AWS's existing infrastructure, and that reduces expenses significantly, right? Part of the OLA, we also provide a total blueprint or snapshot of your EC2 instances, what that would look like, or virtual machines, what instances are required for fully operational, ongoing matters, the licenses as well that we saw. So we give a brief or a detailed rundown of current licenses and what we expect that should happen once we reduce licenses. Again, once we do the OLA, of course, Agile Source alongside with us at AWS, we would sit down with you. And what we do this, we do this very often, right? We sit down, and this is where it all ties in what I was mentioning, that we take very seriously that every organization is different, right? And this is where it comes in. There's no company that is the same, right? So we want to make sure that we do an entire sweep of what lies under the hood of your company, and we're able to help you visualize it better. Another example, just to finish this report example that we're looking at, SQL Standard, for example, on-prem cores. reducing from 32 to 16, right? So all in all, we see that that in general, really the OLA truly adds significant value to what we're doing. So what we'll do here is we'll just make a quick stop before we continue talking a little bit more about AWS. Again, there's no commitment for you guys joining today. If you give us your information, we're able to contact you to see how we can better set you up for success by conducting an OLA assessment at your convenience, and then we can move it forward. Okay. For next steps, would basically be just conducting the assessment, and then depending on how we want to decide to move forward with you, we'll move on to a migration and then optimization type of projects and modernization. So once you decide to migrate and to conduct the assessment, AWS is there to help you with, alongside Agile Source, to truly move forward in your digital journeys, right? As you decide to continue to innovate your company. All in all, just to conclude a little bit of what the OLA provides value on, cost optimization, we're able to truly highlight how to reduce your expenses and how to optimize your cost footprint, how to improve your performance and flexibility, not only for the short term, but to position you for success for the long term. Always within making sure that you're complying with regulatory mandates. That's always something that's important that we take into consideration. And again, positioning you for success for a strategic cloud adoption in the future. Okay. To recap, the OLA for this time period, thanks to our Agile Source, it will have no cost for the assessment. It usually takes roughly 3 hours to conduct in just a couple of meetings with you guys. At the end of the day, we make sure that once we have that first discovery call and we start deploying the migration evaluator tool, that everything flows smoothly. Once we collect all the data, we'll sit down with you and have a couple of meetings just to walk you through the report, and then we can decide how to help you moving forward, right? So to move forward, we'll be here. We'll get a hold of you or get a hold of us. That's why we'll put the link on the chat so that you are able to that we can have your information. We can have a one-on-one, more intimate conversation with you and see how we can help you. Okay. So for the sake of time, I think we're good. We can keep on going talking about AWS and what the OLA further details, but we can make a stop here, and what we can do is open it up for any Q&As, any comments or questions that anybody might have, and then we can take it from there.
So I've got one question here through. Does AWS recommend rerunning the OLA periodically post-migration to track continuous optimization opportunities?
That's a great question. We do so, but honestly, the OLA was really designed for that first preemptive approach to migrate to the cloud. Once you do the link to your company, AWS offers other similar types of programs or comprehensive analyses. We have, for example, the well-architected framework review. We have a map program, which is a little bit more comprehensive. So yes, it could be done, but once you establish that relationship with somebody like Agile Source, with AWS, then the OLA perhaps is not as required per se on a repetitive basis. We're able to just basically take a look at what's already, once you migrate it to the cloud, we're able to see everything on AWS and be able to continuously improve. And that's why, or where a assessment like the well-architected framework will help you, because everything's already on the cloud.
Okay, one more is, if the question is, they're already partly in the cloud, and so how does OLA help with that if they have a little bit in AWS already, and then they have some stuff on on-prem?
Yeah, in that case, it does help. We encourage hybrid cloud environments, or we don't encourage them, but we're very open to that. We understand that many companies work with hybrid cloud environments. So when we run into companies that are already on AWS, but they're, let's say, 80% of their workloads or most of their environment is still on-prem or a third-party public cloud, not being AWS, then we can definitely take an OLA for looking at those workloads and understanding how to migrate them better. But we see that it's a commonplace theme, right? We see organizations that migrate little by little. So yes, it would be applicable.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay.